Well, hi. Katie Kimball for the Healthy Parenting Connector and Kids Cook Real Food today. And our family's been traveling for, I guess, about 2.5 weeks now. We are now in the beautiful mountains of rural Alabama where the bugs come a little big. Did you guys see that? That was a big bug. Not my favorite. And today's Healthy Parenting Connector is about the challenges of raising an adult. Okay, if you caught last week's amazing interview with best-selling author Julie Lythcott-Haims, you will know kind of what I'm talking about. She's the author of How to Raise an Adult, and she was a Stanford dean and watched 10 years of freshmen come into Stanford. Now, these should be the brightest of the bright, right? They should be like the young adults that we as a society are most proud of. And what she saw is over those 10 years, more and more kids were being literally sometimes held by the hand by their parents. Their parents were bringing them to the campus. They were unpacking for them. They were doing the tour. They were asking the questions for the kids who should be becoming young adults. And she thought this is a very, very concerning trend. And so the more research she did, the more she found on the deficits of helicopter parenting and what it's doing to our society and to our young adults. So today I thought I would talk about why, as much as when I talk to her, I'm like, yes, I want to do that. Yes, okay, obviously we have to just raise adults. That's what I've always wanted to do, and just everything she says resonates with me. But it's challenging for a couple reasons in today's society. One major reason that raising an adult and letting kids fail in this society is difficult is because of other people's judgment on us. Okay, social media and comparisonitis makes it very challenging. It's also, I think, challenging when one kid's decision, which might be a bad decision, affects the whole family and doesn't just affect them. How to figure out how to balance fairness for the whole family with that child being allowed to learn from their mistakes. And then the classic, like I hear this from parents all the time at Kids Cook Real Food, when we talk about cooking in the kitchen and teaching kids to cook, it's just easier to do it ourselves. It's always faster and easier to do it ourselves. So it's, you know, it's a great kind of climbing to the top of the mountain and getting over ourselves psychologically to teach our children certain life skills, to give them space and time and wider boundaries to make their own mistakes. It's difficult for us as parents. So we're going to dig into each of those three things. But do you guys want to see where I am? It's really cool. Actually, you almost can see. Hold on. I'll give you a little tour. So I'm sitting here, and let's see. So that's Mount Cheaha, the Cheaha Mountains. I think that's actually Mount Cheaha, the tallest point in Alabama at 2,400 feet. And then we got, you might hear some roosters, we got cows lowing across the field, and there's a pond in the backyard. So it's amazing, you guys. Both the sunrise and the sunset, like, have the colors on all sides of the house. It, like, doesn't even make sense, I guess, because we're at some elevation. Like, it's beautiful here. Who knew there were mountains in Alabama? But we're enjoying our time at the Airbnb, and, you know, climbing a mountain with kids is a really good opportunity to let them make some mistakes. And as much as I try, I'm not super good at it. I've done a lot of like, nope, don't take another step, don't get closer to the edge, nope. Like, I know you won't fall, but I don't want you any closer. So, a little bit of stressful situation for mom. We did like an 800-foot elevation change over a mile, which was some serious climbing with a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old and an 11 and 14-year-old. It was some serious climbing. And it was really cool, and the kids did great, and mom did fairly well. I'll give myself like a C+, which is not acceptable because I'm kind of a perfectionist. But let's talk about why it's so difficult to raise adults. One of the most poignant stories, and just quick, that Julie told last week was she grabbed her bottle of mineral water and she said that she's hearing that young adults are literally unable to open the top. They don't have the dexterity and like the strength to open the top. The young adults, like not like 4-year-olds, like young adults. That is petrifying to me. And I was thinking the other day as I was pushing the button on my key fob to unlock my car, and I was pushing the button on our van slider to open it, and I was pushing the button up here to open the rear hatch, and pushing the button inside the rear hatch to close it. I thought, good grief. Like, I know it's not a lot of work to open a van door. Like, no one's going to build muscles opening a van door a couple times a day. Same thing with the hatch, like opening it up, pulling it closed, the key. Like, no one is literally going to become a bodybuilder doing these things. However, how many small motions during the day are we mechanizing? Are we turning into buttons, right? Because even, I'm just thinking, even just the dexterity of turning a key, like, people don't do that anymore. We have keypads for our house, we have keypads for our car, and key fobs. Like, we're getting very dexterous thumbs, but what about like the whole, you know, the twisty, the same thing that you use to open a bottle of Perrier? So I don't know. I wonder in, you know, over the decades, as we buttonize our society, what the ramifications will be. And will people, economists or archaeologists, I don't know, something-ists, will scientists be looking back at this time in history and say, wow, that was the transition between like actual motor skills, both large and small, and pushing buttons? I don't know. Our whole body is going to atrophy. Worries me a little bit. So, you know, that's why I like to kick my kids outside. Unfortunately, to do this video, I just kicked them inside. They were not very happy with me, but that's okay. It's just 20 minutes. It's just 20 minutes. So the 3 challenges we're going to talk about today in raising an adult that are very difficult are being judged by others and comparisonitis, particularly with social media. When a kid's decision really affects the whole family, and you have to figure out, like, should I still allow them to make that decision? Should I still give them that agency and that choice? And always, it's easier and faster to do things ourselves. So, you know, how do we get over this? I have the unique position of lots and lots of people watching me parent my kids because I have made myself this public figure. You know, I always say I'm not famous, but I do play famous on the internet sometimes, right? So I post pictures of my kids and I tell stories about my kids because, you know, one of the pieces of my brand and my platform is raising healthy adults, raising independent healthy adults, and teaching kids to cook. So my kids are kind of part of the brand here at Kids Cook Real Food. So like the day after I did the interview with Julie Lythcott-Haims that we posted last week, again, it's summer now, but when I interviewed her, it was school year. The day after I did the interview, my daughter forgot something for school. So it was like top of mind, you know, between Julie Lythcott-Haims and Jessica Lahey, who wrote The Gift of Failure. These are like kind of 2 of my favorite pinnacle books of the last year. Very top of mind. My daughter forgets something for school. It just so happened that they had a worm bin at school the day before she came home, and she said, Mom, no one else, I don't think anyone else is going to bring scraps, but I'm going to bring a bunch of scraps. And like, she was kind of setting herself up to be the hero, and she was really proud of herself. And I was proud too that she was taking responsibility. She collected all these worm bin scraps, like stuffed a quart bag at least, might have been more than that. But in the morning, she was not having a good day. She was not listening to reason. I gave her some strategies like, ooh, I see your worm bin stuff. Do you think you should put that by the door? Nope, I won't forget it. And I'm like, okay. And anyway, long story short, she leaves for school in a huff and left the worm bin scraps on the counter. And I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. I could have taken them to school. It's a 5-minute drive, not even. I could have taken them to school. I had stuff to do that day, so it wouldn't have been convenient. But I thought, she's got to learn from failure. She's got to learn, because she wouldn't listen to any of the good strategies for like remembering things, like putting a note on your backpack, or putting, you know, the thing in the backpack, or putting the thing by the front door, or putting it on her shoes. We had talked about all that stuff the day before, and she just dug in her heels. I thought, I can't take it. And my husband was like, are you sure? I don't know if this is a good idea. I'm like, I don't know if it's a good idea either, but I can't take it. And then she calls. Then she calls from the office, which I know took a lot of guts. And she asked if I could take them, and my heart just dropped. And I thought, oh boy. I said, honey, I can't do that for you. I have a busy day. I don't remember what I said. It was heartbreaking. And she said, okay. And she got off the phone. Now, she was angry with me later in the day, but I, in perhaps an error in judgment, I don't know, I did take a picture of those worm bin scraps, and I shared that on Instagram and Facebook. And then I proceeded to have to spend 1 to 2 hours of my day, which, you know, time I didn't have, responding to comments from the moms of the internet who were really, really unhappy with me. They were like begging me to take the worm bin scraps, which it was already too late. Like, science was first hour. So I still don't know if I made the right decision. I really don't. But had my daughter used some strategies and they failed, or had she made, she did make an effort with the call, and maybe I should have done it. I don't know. But let me tell you that the whole decision-making process was hard enough on its own. It was made much, much harder by the wrath of the internet. I mean, parents and grandparents of all ages came down on me and thought I made a terrible decision. And again, I don't know what it was. Every single piece of the story, of course, wasn't in a short social media post. They didn't know that she had dug in her heels and that I had given her some strategies, and that, she was being stubborn, and she was, it wasn't that she was having a bad day, she was choosing to have a bad day. Oh my goodness. So I don't know. I still don't know if I made the right decision. But I will tell you that other people, the way other people observe and judge our parenting, can make it really, really hard to raise an adult and to do the right thing, because sometimes raising an adult looks like laissez-faire parenting. Sometimes it looks from the outside as if you don't care, because you're not micromanaging your child's life, because you're not helicoptering, or the new term is lawnmower parenting, literally paving the way for them to have it easy. Well, I don't want my kids to have an easy life. I don't. And so I refuse to listen to other people's judgment. I'm happy to have, cognitive, academic conversation. I'm happy to have polite conversation and even challenging conversation. I'm happy to have differences of opinion, but I refuse to buckle under the judgment of other parents about the decisions that I'm making after doing my research and reading books and talking to other parents and observing the way I was raised and observing the way others are raised. So I'm determined to raise a healthy, independent adult in spite of what other people say. But comparisonitis makes it very difficult. Second, I really struggle when a kid's decision affects the whole family. Like if you're out for an outing and someone is really being naughty or making a terrible decision, the gut reaction is to say, hey, if you continue doing this, we have to turn around and go home. Except that affects everyone, right? That kills everyone's time. That's not really fair. That's like punishments for the whole class when one kid did something wrong, and I never approve of that when it's my kids in the class, and I never really liked it as a teacher. Sometimes it's the only thing you can do, but I find that really difficult. Or, saying to a kid like, well, hey, because part of raising a healthy, independent adult is letting them fail, right? It's letting them make the mistake and deal with the consequences. But if letting someone fail, like a kid doesn't wash the table, right? They forget their responsibility. Well, that's irresponsible. And ideally, the parent's job isn't to get on them and to micromanage and to consistently remind them, because now they're only learning to wash the table. They're not learning to actually be responsible, right? Being responsible is figuring out how to remember it for yourself. But if the kid doesn't wash the table, the whole family, including the parents who are the most grossed out, have to eat breakfast on a disgusting table and have to eat lunch on a disgusting table. So it's like how do we do that when a child is forgetting a task that doesn't only impact them, but affects the whole family? So, I think the answer for that one is we have to try to build those habits and say, hey, you forgot, you need to do this before you eat breakfast, even if you don't think you have time. And then how can you remember this the next time? And try to talk through some strategies with them. Which leads me to the next challenge, right? Because it's always faster and easier to do it yourself. If a kid's job is to wash the table and they forget, definitely faster and easier to do it yourself once they're in bed. It's not like you're going to pull them out of bed, right? And that mornings are rushed and they have to get off to school or start your homeschool day or whatever. So all of that kind of piling on top, like the judgment and perspective of other parents, the fact that sometimes when kids make mistakes, it affects the whole family, and where is the line of like fairness to all versus building the capacity of the one. And then it's always faster and easier to do it ourselves. So being an intentional parent takes guts, it takes stubbornness, it takes perseverance. It's very difficult. So bravo to all of you who have that goal, who want to raise healthy and independent adults. I think it's so, so important. And I actually learned something this weekend. The host at this Airbnb went totally above and beyond. They gave us a 2-hour tour of some of their 700 acres of property. And it turns out that this guy, Mr. Lamar, he's a forestry expert. He was a professor in college teaching forestry for years. So, talk about learning about trees and nature while we were out there. We loved it. We love learning. And here's what we learned. In this area of Alabama, the pine forest used to be mostly longleaf pine. Longleaf pine are sturdy. They're incredibly straight. In fact, they are the trees that are often turned into utility poles. Okay, I mean, so talk about straight. I never really thought about the utility pole being like it's actually a tree. Because when you start looking around at trees, like they're rarely perfectly straight. But the longleaf pine is so sturdy and so straight that it makes, you know, really good lumber and really good utility poles. But what's interesting is that in this area, we're down to 3% of the longleaf pine forests that there used to be, you know, a couple hundred years ago before civilization took over the area in the mountains of Alabama. And it's a little bit, you know, deforestation and people moving in and just changing the environment. But what's really interesting is that the biggest thing that people have done that get rid of, or that have hurt these longleaf pine forests, is that we stopped burning them. So it's crazy. A longleaf pine, when it's about this tall, you have to burn the whole forest to get rid of competition, and that tree, for whatever reason, likes to be burned when it's a baby. It needs to be challenged. And then another couple years later, when it's, I don't even know how tall, it's still a little teeny little shoot, you burn the whole forest again. And it gets rid of the competition, but it also challenges that pine tree. And if a longleaf pine forest is not burned a couple times when they're babies and children, little baby, little kid trees, so first of all, about half of the forest will die and will not make it through to adulthood. And the ones who do will take like 75 to 85 years to grow into something substantial that can like be helpful to people who are trying to make money off the forest, right? That can be turned into lumber or whatever, and then the forest can start over. If they're burned a couple times, it only takes about 25 to 35 years to turn into something substantial. And instead, when burning does not happen, when people think they're like doing a good thing and like saving the forest from being burned, these loblolly pines grow. And the loblolly pines, they are kind of how they sound. They sound kind of like whimsical, like loblolly, and they just kind of like poof all over, and they're really crooked, and the like needles kind of hang out in these little puffs like spiny cotton balls. And it just made me think, what a connection that is to humanity, right? Because really, if we protect our humans, if we protect our little baby and our little kid humans from all the fire that may make them stronger, they end up being kind of whimsical, kind of floppy, and they kind of don't grow up very tall, and they may take much, much longer to grow into productive adults that we're proud to send into the world. Just like the loblolly, or just like the longleaf, the ones who do survive without being burned. But if we let our kids, you know, get burned a little bit, we let them feel what it's like to be in the real world, you know, they're gonna get bullied, and I'm not advocating bullying, but we can't protect them from everything. We have to teach them to be stronger through that fire, right? And then, just like the longleaf pine, they become more productive, better adults faster. I don't want my kids to be adults when they're 10. I don't need that. But I do want my kids to start behaving like adults when they're 18, when they're 20, and when they're 22. And right now in this society, because of, I think, the judgment and the high standards that other parents are setting, because it's faster and easier to do it ourselves, and because sometimes we don't know what to do when to let our kids make mistakes when it's tricky and impacts the family. Sometimes we tend to just be helicopter parents, and we protect them from that burning, from that trials and tribulations that most humans need to go through to stand straight and tall and strong like the longleaf pine. We've learned so many cool things on this trip, and there have definitely been some hard points. There have been some things where my kids have pushed themselves and they've had to be really, really brave. There have been some times I've been really, really brave, and there have been some times when I've been a jerk and I've yelled at my kids and I've protected them a little too much. So I hope that in the next 3.5 to 4 weeks, as we continue our adventure, that I can continue to raise healthy, independent adults through a little trial and tribulation in spite of the comparisonitis that's so strong in our society. And my hope for you is that you can do the same. So let's open up that conversation, you know? Let's have that great academic, polite, constructive conversation about how do we, in today's society, properly raise adults that we're proud to send off into the world. Okay? If you haven't seen last week's Healthy Parenting Connector with Julie Lithcott-Hames, so good. Okay, she is just a delight to talk to. She's a delight to listen to. So definitely watch that one because she has more good things to say than I do. But let's think about our kids as those straight, tall, longleaf pines that in 25 years they can become incredibly productive and strong and tall if and only if the forest is burned to the ground at least twice when they're baby trees and little kid trees. So don't be afraid of letting your kids feel a little heat, metaphorical heat, and maybe even physical heat. Don't be afraid to get your kids in the kitchen. Don't be afraid to give them sharp knives. We'll teach you how at Kids Cook Real Food. That's totally part of our mission, and we're here to help you raise healthy, independent adults as I stumble through this process as a mom in the trenches with you. I'm Katie Kimball for the Healthy Parenting Connector and Kids Cook Real Food. It's been a pleasure talking with you today. Oh, isn't it nice out? It's been a pleasure sitting on this porch. I think I'm going to just sit out here for 10 minutes and not tell the kids I'm done. Would that be okay? Can I do that? We'll see. I won't lie. I won't lie if they ask. But maybe I just won't go inside yet because it's quite nice out. See you next week with another Healthy Parenting Connector where we help connect parents who really want to raise healthy kids with the experts who have the information they need. Thanks for being here.